Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle. Me. This is going to be a continuation on this book, the Allende Letters and the Vero edition of the Case for UFOs. Interesting material. The short story is Mr. Morris Jessup was an astronomer looking at the sky, and an explorer, educated professor, even explored down in Nicaragua the Mayan ruins and had some commercial contracts for companies investigating the trees in Venezuela, South America, they used to make rubber. So he wrote a book on the case for UFOs, and apparently somebody's edited his book, marked it all up, highlighted it, different colors of ink, seemingly like they were outsiders of planet Earth or aliens even, and delivered a copy of the book to the Navy in a manila envelope with said Happy Easter on it. Well, the Navy read the book and saw the highlights and scratched their head and said, wow, this is kind of weird. Contacted Mr. Jessup. He came down to the Department of Navy, looked at the book, looked at the highlights, and said, oh my, I've received 2 letters from a Carlos Allende, and that's the same handwriting as one of those people that marked up my book. So they collaborated and tried to figure out what was going on. And I've done part 1 and part 2. If you remember, I talked about shortcut to space travel, the Philadelphia experiment, where the ship disappeared with the microwave transmitters around it. And when it reappeared, apparently it had been spotted several places around the world. But when it reappeared, some of the crew members were embedded half in and half out of the bulkheads. So that was part 1, and part 2 was a lot of notes here from the supposedly aliens or somebody, maybe not from planet Earth or some secret society, something, were editing and making comments about his book about seemingly UFO and alien activity going on Earth. So you can go watch part 1 and part 2 if you haven't already seen them. But part 3 is kind of odd. And it's just a matter for me to keep the conversation going. There are some weird things going on planet Earth today. March 2nd, 2016. A lot of satanic and luciferic stuff going on. Symbols and programming, magazines, billboards, Grammys, Emmys, football halftime shows, even in Europe where they had Eurovision, which is similar to our American Idol program. The winner was Cochita Wurst. Wurst means sausage, Cochita means a female part. It had a head on this person like Jesus and a body, a woman in a silky dress, singing the song Phoenix Rising with the words, you can't stop us. If that's not bizarre, there's so much more. Troops forming in Saudi Arabia on the northern border, and south of Russia in Belarus and areas like that. Other troops are forming, in Turkey troops are forming, and apparently probably Syria and Iran are preparing to defend themselves, with a lot of people predicting World War III. And if that's not enough for you, you know, we got the Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton campaign. Last year, Jade Helm 15, where they were putting troops and all kinds of sophisticated software programs monitoring all the people and their reaction to the Jade Helm 15 troop and equipment disbursement around the United States. They're trying to make sure they know what we're going to do when they do what they're going to do. Who are they? This series is Freemasonry and Satanism. And if you look up Freemasonry, even Buzz Aldrin was one of the Apollo astronauts that supposedly went to the moon. Well, anyways, if you look him up and you look up Freemasonry, he's in full regalia, you know, all the symbols and a uniform. And if you look at it, you can see all the same symbols that is on Aleister Crowley, who was a Freemason with all the regalia and symbols. The evilest man alive, and you look up Satanism and these Illuminati people and all these other mystery school of Babylon cults, you're going to see all these same symbols. So we know they're trying to destroy Christianity. The Supreme Court stacked with Jewish Supreme Court justices, and then a mysterious death of Scalia with a pillow supposedly on top of his head, at a time when, if they do declare martial law or make a fast move on Americans, they're going to need another bought and paid for liberal judge on the Supreme Court to override the Constitution. Then they talk about Planet X coming, pole shifting, earthquakes, CO2 spewing out of the ground in California, where they have maps now from satellites, I suppose, that show the stuff coming out, like almost like the results of a volcano. You know how it goes up in the air and it blows off one way or the other, and they have to ban aircraft travel and all that? They got CO2 dispersing out of the ground. So, you know, the bottom line is, what are we to believe? And there's more. FEMA camps, government buying 450 million hollow point bullets. Obama just declaring more executive order gun control laws. And recently I just learned that when they do an executive order, they don't have to do another executive order to change the executive order. They could just change it, the president. So when he did the presidential executive order, he opened the door to knowing who has a gun, where they are. Why would they need that information? What's all this got to do with UFOs and aliens? Well, when I read some of this, because I think the question in my mind is, who's behind the scenes? Who really controls Earth? Who causes all these problems? Who are the Illuminati? Who are the witchcraft? What are demons? Unclean spirits? Reptilians? Gray aliens? Just inquiring minds want to know. At least my inquiring mind wants to know. So if all that wasn't enough to kind of make your mind a little dazed, this ought to be interesting. What is really going on? Some of this stuff is a bit bizarre. In Simon's Meteorological Magazine for 1889, it is said that the annual fall of rain at Norfolk, England, is about 29 inches. That's a year. Almost 30 inches a year. And that is not a dry or desert locality. But Mr. Simons points out that the volumes of water up to 24 inches fell from May 25 to May 28th in South Wales, New South Wales. And a deluge much greater, 34 inches, which engulfed Hong Kong on May 29th and May 30th. So exactly 2 days, 3 days in New South Wales, England, and then the next 2 days in Hong Kong. That's quite a distance away. Another 34 inches. So it would seem something was hovering over England and then moved across the sky towards China and did the same thing. Odd? In the United States, 1 inch of rain a day is a big fall. 2 inches is a flood. So they had like 34 inches in 2 days. That's 15 inches a day. A normal thunder shower can bring 1/8 to 1/2 inch of rainwater. Mr. Simons called attention to these two splashes of 1/2 inch of rainwater. Mr. Simons called attention to these two splashes, which were a couple of 1,000 miles or more apart, and posed the question of whether they were merely coincidence, but leaving it to professional meteorologists, though, thousands of miles apart, might be remarkable and not easy to explain. So how could buckets, like somebody bursting a gigantic balloon over England and for 3 days, and then 1,000 miles away for 2 days, like somebody bursted a balloon of water. So anyways, I'm not reading all of this, but the alien says, so remember this is Dr. Jessup's book that was marked up by either aliens or some other kind of entities. But it says also New Zealand, and I do not know how this came to pass, Jamie. So apparently these entities who are marking up Dr. Jessup's book said that the same thing happened in New Zealand, which is interesting. England, China, and then moving off in that direction is New Zealand, like in a straight arrow. So Dr. Jessup says, we believe that you should question how much widespread upheaval of our normal meteorological processors could be generated without an encounter with extraterrestrial clouds or space matter. So there's an interesting theory, I guess, if I'm thinking correctly here. What if it was a comet that was made out of ice and hit the atmosphere? But the problem with that is, why would a comet would move faster than 5 days? It would just streak across the sky. Unless it was several comets, one following another, that hit the Earth at different times, hit the atmosphere and melted, and there came the deluge of rain. So it's just an interesting thing to point out, but it gets much more interesting. That's why I chose these few pages. Okay, and I'm only reading my highlighted portion, so we're not getting it all. Just want to have a conversation about weird stuff happening, because I think a lot of weird stuff is going on now, and it looks like some weird stuff is going to happen in the near future. Somebody's preparing for something. Planet X, Nibiru, the Destroyer, nuclear war, EMP pulses, CO2 dispersing from the Earth, spewing out of the ground like a geyser over California, sky spraying, HARP systems, New World Order and New Age, troop movements, the government preparing for something. Even in Texas, the alert systems have started going on weekly at the same time. Emergency alarms on the TV, according to Lisa Haven, one of her videos. On March 23, 24, and 25, a watery sky sat on the Catskills and Adirondacks. I guess that would be up there in upstate New York. It slipped and ripped its pants on a peak, and rivers invaded the streets of Troy and Albany. Lampposts disappeared, and furniture floated against the ceilings of the rooms. In New Jersey, something called a cloudburst grabbed factories and made a mess of them. This is in 1913. Cluttering up the nicely laid out streets, there were 1,000 dead in Columbus, Ohio, which is close to Dayton, And the Delaware River at Trenton was 14 feet above normal. The Ohio River floods at the slightest opportunity. It had a field day. At Parkersburg, West Virginia, people called on their second-story neighbors in rowboats. There were lakes in Vermont. Farmers were caught napping in Wisconsin. Destructive floods occurred in Illinois and Missouri. Waters were falling and freezing on trees in Canada, breaking power lines and telegraph wires, flooding powerhouses. Towns were in darkness, listening to crashes of trees heavy with ice. California, 2,000 miles from Ohio, was drenched. Torrents were falling in Washington and Oregon. Texas should be warm, not maybe hot. In later March, there were unprecedented snows, and also in New Mexico, Oklahoma. Alabama was inundated. Florida flooded. Wow, the whole United States was having a deluge of water. Deluges in France. All Europe was wet. Not much sunny evaporation there. In Spain, near Vaselina, there was a hailstorm. Trains were stalled by unusually large hailstones, piled 3 feet deep. South Africa is practically antipodal to our Midwest. There were watery fists from the skies at Colesburg, Murraysburg, and Pretska, and one of these bulks was the equivalent of 1 inch of the total normal rainfall of South Africa for a whole year. So they talk about climate change now. A lot of issues here to think about. Global warming, global cooling, and why they need to have biodiversity, sustainability, emergency actions by the United Nations. President Obama called for emergency actions on the global warming issue in December 2015. So did the Pope call on emergency actions in 2015 when he visited the United States. This is 2015, 2016. So in 1913, they had this climate, or these deluges of water, that were just completely off the chart. Nothing like that has ever happened that I'm aware of in my lifetime. So what's with this sustainability, biodiversity, Agenda 21, New World Order, New Age, Supreme Court justices, most of them, half of them, Jewish folks who are saying that states can't ban gay marriage, and then also in New York City, $250,000 fine if you say the wrong words to a transgender person. In other words, call he who was a she, and you call her a she, and they want to fine you. What's going on? Just saying, what does all this social change have to do with climate change programs and sustainability and biodiversity and all this other stuff, police action, and the New World Order, massing for World War III? Does it have anything to do with it? Just interesting to ponder some of this evidence of stuff that happened in the past to compare it with what's going on today in a book about UFOs and aliens, edited apparently by some aliens who are going to comment on these subjects, explaining what they say it is. The Fiji Islands were drenched and Tasmania was underwater. On March 22nd, 1913, a day before the catastrophe in Ohio, 4 neighboring states there began a series of great thunderstorms in Australia, a rain blizzard in New South Wales and Queensland. All transportation was tied up. So we're pretty much having a catastrophe going on all over the planet. Catastrophes. Where do you find out what it was that they think? According to the Wellington Evening Post of New Zealand, March 31, there was the greatest disaster in the history of the colony, New Zealand, where there had been listless rivers, There were unruly torrents embellished in the woolly bodies of sheep. So the unruly rivers were washing away the sheep in what were nothing but dried up rivers. In the accoutrements of farming, the roar of rivers was the cry of drowning in cattle. Store windows were smashed. Dead bodies were wrapped in silk curtains from the red light district. May 1889. There was a spectacular afterglow in France, although no volcanic eruptions had occurred to fill the air with dust. 1889, so right around 1900, 120 years ago. The whole sky filled with black dust. And storms everywhere had supposedly cleared the murky air. There was a red rain in Cardiff, Wales, and red dust fell on the islands of Hyères, off the coast of France. An unknown substance fell for several hours from the sky at St. Louis, crystalline particles, some pink and some white. Fine dust fell in Dakota, looked like a snowstorm. In Greece there was a monstrous debacle, and the rivers choked with cattle. The Bahama Islands were on a spree of water. A downpour was described by a newspaper on St. Helena. A drought occurred in the British Honduras, followed by heavy rains in June 1 and 2. Floods raged in California. Ceylon, Cuba, cities, and plantations of Mexico were raped by deluges. Is this stuff crazy? Apparently it's well documented. All in certain range of latitude. So apparently all this stuff happened on a certain range of latitude around the earth. Deluges and falls of lumps of ice throughout England. France deluged. Water dropped from the sky in Switzerland. Flooded some streets 5 feet deep. It was not rain. They were falling columns of water of what was thought to be a water spout. Can you imagine? It's like somebody turning on a gigantic faucet in heaven, and it's not even rain, it's just a faucet of water falling on the earth. Bulks of it, like somebody burst a gigantic balloon, pop, it comes down. Hope you like my effects. Dropped bulks, and one of them was watched, or some kind of a vast vaporous cow sailed over the sky. And people looked up at her bag of water. So something as huge as a cow, and you know if a cow has a big bag under its stomach where they milk, and so this big cow-like thing sailed over the town, and a large body was seen, her bag burst, I guess. Something that was described as a large body of water was seen at Cobourg, Ontario, even Ontario. It crossed the town, holding its bag-like formation. So all this water in some kind of gigantic bag. Well, think about that. It crossed the town, holding its bag-like formation. When it broke, it splashed rivers that broke all dams between Cobourg and Lake Ontario. In the Toronto Globe, June 3rd, this falling bulk is called a water spout. Fall of a similar bulk was noted in Switzerland and Saxony. This is quoted from the books of Charles Fort. You can see that I have lots of books behind me there. I've got about 7 or 8 bookshelves and closets full of books. But I do have the one on Charles Fort, who was a collector of oddities and facts and stories from newspapers and stuff like that. I've got a lot of reading to do. It says in the back of this book, I call this one of the greatest books ever written in the world. right up there at the top, surely among the first 10. That estimate is based on its potentiality rather than upon any measurable effect to date. Just saying, Jessup's book references this and other books and newspapers as sources for his material. That's how I got all my books. When you're reading a book, I got little tiny numbers next to certain sentences. Facts that the author got from somewhere. Those are called citations. And then if you look at the back of the book, it tells you where the author got the information. So me, when I read stuff, I don't just believe it. I look at the citation, I go to the back of the book, I go on a used book site on the internet or a bookstore, and I buy the book and I read that book, and it has citations, and I look those books up and I read those books, and I've been doing this for more than 10 years, and then I started making videos sharing the information that I had learned. Why? Because I want to share what I have learned, because a lot of people told me, they say, yes, Rick, we know something is going on, something is strange, but what and who and why? And who can you trust from the truth? So that's why I do book reviews and document reviews and magazine reviews and the videos I've watched. At least we can see where I'm getting the information from. And then I can have my opinion, how I rationalize what's happening, what it means, because I do a diversified amount of different topics. Everything from religion, psychic research, politics, history, UFO, aliens, current politics, ancient politics, the Crusades, Egyptian monuments, Zachariah Stitchens to David Icke and his crazy stuff, Infowars.com, William Cooper, so many authors I've done in this series of Freemasonry and Satanism, trying to figure out what the heck in the world is going on and get some facts. So moving on in this book, if those facts I just told you weren't strange enough, it's going to get stranger. One can find plenty of other references to concentrated local cloudburst. They are all of a pattern, solid masses of water flooding small demarcated areas, causing local floods, flash floods. And one was observed in France, yet 2 miles away, dry land. These are what we may call single or isolated slugs of meteoric water. So some kind of slug or giant meteor, not made of rock, probably just ice, hits the atmosphere, melts, and causes at that spot a huge deluge, flood of water, like somebody turned on a faucet, washing away whole factories and towns and cows and cattle and people. In 1886 here, 1913 here. Nothing new under the sun, I suppose. So why is the government now, why are they threatening us with, they need to kind of police us, create a new world order to protect us from global warming? When they're sky spraying and they have the HARP systems, the microwave transmitters, they got the telescopes. Even the Vatican has a telescope in Arizona, which is named Lucifer, if that's not strange enough. So let's get back to this book here. Then there are clouds that seem to come from, at least be connected with, outer space. Remember, astronomers are watching the sky. They report seeing black dots and things crossing the face of the sun. They are often noted only by casual phrase in passing, in connection with hailstorms, earthquakes, and sudden violent disturbances of the air. If I'm trying to make a point with this video, on this book is that there were some strange things happening 100 years ago, and further back, and not so far distant back. Things that seem concerning and may make us wonder why they're declaring it an emergency today. Sustainability, biodiversity, Agenda 21, the New Age, the New World Order, global warming, global cooling, climate change, plagues, terrorism, pole shifting, earthquakes, comets coming, Planet X, Nibiru, World War III, economic destruction, etc., etc., etc. So I'll get back to the book. Page 80. 1955. 9 hurricanes. 1955. Where there never were before. And all of a sudden, too. So 1995, there were 9 hurricanes where there were never any before, and all of a sudden. So is this intelligence created or Mother Nature? The other category of clouds or storms of seemingly cosmic nature are larger. Sometimes we think they may be larger than the earth itself. And in the case of dust or mist, they may be very much larger. They seem to cause all sorts of widespread trouble and disturbance, either directly or by generally upsetting the earth's meteorological balance. They may cause discoloration of the sun for considerable periods, diminution of its light, dimming the sun's light, with ensuing darkness or very cold weather, such as extremes of the winter of 1882 to 1883. Moving on. When space around the Earth seemed to be replete with clouds of spatial debris, they may bring floods to the whole Earth simultaneously. They do not always seem to be wholly vaporous, and there are some which are certainly made up of debris, dust, water, stones, ice, etc. So apparently, throughout history, strange things fall from the sky. It's almost as if the Earth, hurtling through space, goes through a debris field. Or some kind of an event causes a lot of debris to be thrown at Earth. Moving on. 1697. A horrid black cloud, attended by frequent lightnings, was precursor to a violent hailstorm. Animals were killed, crops ruined, and people had their heads broken. The breadth of the cloud was about 2 miles. So a horrid black cloud showed up in 1697, almost 1700. 300 years ago, plus. 1812. The latest remarkable fall of aerolites in Europe, of which there is a distinct account, was in the vicinity of Langle, Normandy, early in the afternoon of April 26, 1812. A fiery globe of a very brilliant splendor, which moved in the air with great rapidity, was followed in a few seconds by a violent explosion which lasted 5 or 6 minutes, was heard for 30 leagues in all directions. 3 or 4 reports of those of a cannon were followed by discharge resembling musketry fire, after which a dreadful rumbling was heard, like the beating of a huge drum. So was it a spaceship or some kind of comet that a fiery globe with a very brilliant splendor zoomed across the sky in 1812. The noise proceeded from a small cloud of rectangular form, the largest side being in a direction from east to west. It appeared motionless all the time the phenomenon lasted. The cloud was about half a league to the north of Langle, and was at so great an altitude that the inhabitants of two hamlets a league apart saw it directly overhead. A multitude of meteoric stones fell amid a hissing sound. Strange? Alright, so what did the aliens say it was? Thunderbird, Dragon of Lao Fus, page 27, saucer. All the same thing, all rumble when hit hard or when in need of repairs. So apparently these aliens have some kind of craft. Or maybe they're not aliens. They could be creatures that have been on Earth or in the vicinity all along, called a Thunderbird or a Dragon of Lao Fus. And they all rumble when they're hit hard. Apparently they've been having some cosmic wars with the aliens, or when in need of repairs. The shape of that cloud is important. Rectangular clouds do not just happen. They almost certainly have to be made. The clouds which they usually provoke are not capable of sustaining the heavy meteorite material inside, should the whole complex become immobile. So are there some gigantic craft flying above our space that camouflage themselves with clouds? There is something of the incongruousness in meteors which exit from clouds, especially clouds of such peculiar formation that they do not associate easily with the common variety of weather clouds. So meteors that exit clouds. That sounds like an artificial craft or cause. But under some circumstances, so the alien says here, people who marked up Jessup's book, under such circumstances, how do we form a cloud in time for a meteor to emerge from it? You can't. The alien also underlines this sentence. In short, does there seem to be a slight difference between the usual meteors and those which emerge from clouds? Could be a time portal opening caused by a meteor hurtling through space, creating its own time portal vortex. Just theorizing using my brain. Stuff that happens, stuff that's documented, stuff that may be applicable to our thinking today with the unusual events going on around the world. Like those trumpet sounds or scraping sounds that people hear almost going on underground, which some people think are those tunnel-making machines. Or screeching trains zooming through these underground tunnels. We don't know what they are because the powers that be don't tell us. We quote the following from Observatory, 1877, a popular British astronomical monthly of competence and reliability. So a magazine called Observatory in 1877. The meteor was seen by J. Platt, Esquire, FOS of Salford, and is described by him as bursting from an intensely lit cloud, like a ball of silver, quite as large as the moon. The explosion was remarkable, a whirling shower of pearl drop stars, ruby blue, white, and yellow, radiating from the center mass, the colors being quite brilliant. 1877. What is of interest to us is the cloud, which seems to have preceded the meteor instead of following it, especially to have been illuminated or self-luminous. Many are the report of meteors emerging from clouds, as in 1808. Such a phenomenon as appeared in CN in 1794, when stones descended not from a moving meteor, but from a luminous cloud. So you got a luminous cloud in the sky, and stones start descending from it. A yellow cloud appeared over Paderborn, from which came a torrential rain and a shower of mussels. The triangular cloud with a tail, whose red nucleus exploded. February 13th, 1901, greenish-yellow clouds appeared in France, spreading intense darkness. People froze to death in Naples that night. Wow. So a greenish-yellow cloud appears, intense darkness, and people froze to death. 1901. Naples in southernmost Italy. Did something bring the cold of outer space? The Journal of the Royal Meteorological Society contains some extracts from the captain's log of the ship Lady of the Lake, Captain F.W. Banner, on March 22nd, 1870. Position 5547 north latitude, 2752 west longitude. The crew observed a remarkable cloud in the sky. It was a cloud with a circular form, which enclosed a semicircle divided into 4 parts. The central dividing line, cord, bar, partition, or what, started at the center of the circle and extended far beyond the limits of the structure, then curving backward like a hook. The alien says, so the aliens wrote their own notes on Jessup's book, where my finger is. So it was reported in the Journal of Royal Meteorological Society, that information, but whoever marked up Jessup's book says, no cloud ever shaped by wind could ever take this shape, no how in nature. So, intelligence created cloud. This cloud had geometric shape and a mechanical complexity. In fact, it had an organic or artificial form. This cloud, Thompson says, in August and September 1831, there was an anomalous brightness in the sky, and small print was visible at midnight. So it was so bright out at midnight you could read. The barometer fell, the sun was a silvery whiteness, and storms were general in Europe and the West Indies. W.S. Forrest says, citizens were much surprised on the morning of August 13, 1831, by the strange appearance of the sun. The sun's disk seemed, on rising, to have changed from its usual golden color to a pale greenish tint, which soon gave way to a coral blue. This is a silvery white. In the afternoon, the sun appeared like an immense plain of polished silver. And to the naked eye there was exhibited an appearance on the surface termed a black spot on the sun. The sun shone with a dull, gloomy light, and the atmosphere was moist and heavy. These 2 passages, one written in England and the other in Virginia, will serve to indicate the vastness of this condition and the nature of it. So from Virginia to England, this situation was described in 1831. Many sources mention frequent causes of darkness and obscuration of the sun. There is, in this darkness, or cold days, the blending of terrestrial and cosmic clouds. Cosmic clouds. We will have other occasions to mention cosmic clouds in connection with these things astronomers have seen in space. For now, it is enough to say that when these clouds contact the earth, we have dust, gas, obscuration, darkness, cold, meteorological disturbances in general, a blending of the meteoric and meteorological conditions. According to the Chicago Tribune, January 7th, 1892, a fiery blast shot across the state of Georgia. And the previous June 5th described as a black tornado filled with fire. About this time, there were earthquake shocks in Italy, approximately the same geographical latitude. People in New York State were watching a glare in the sky, and shocks were felt. On June 8th, dust fell from the sky in northern Indiana. Quakes followed around the world for several days. Snow fell in Mobile, which is certainly an indication that the storm may have brought materials from the cold of outer space. There was a tidal wave in Atlanta, in the Atlantic, and there were shocks in Memphis, Tennessee, on June 14th. There was a tidal wave in Lake Michigan on June 18th. A massive fire fell from the sky on the 20th. A massive fire fell from the sky on a town in Massachusetts. At the same time, quakes occurred in Italy and France. On the 24th, a great meteor shot over Cape Town, Durango, Mexico, had its first rain in 4 years. Glare in the sky alarmed Germans on the 26th. In England, people watched a luminous cloud at night. Quakes were reported in Tasmania and Australia. 1892. Now think about it. These things were reported. Newspapers, journals, magazines. They happened. Anything like that happening now? Could something happen? Of course. Is Earth hurtling through space? Or is the Earth flat? If the Earth was flat, sitting on a gigantic plane, that doesn't mean something still couldn't be shot from above. Let's see what the aliens say here. So the aliens said, believe it or not here, it was a small battle. Look where my finger is. So were there some alien craft actually having a battle in our atmosphere, causing these disturbances all over the planet? Again, we're talking Freemasonry and Satanism. Who are these groups that have to be initiated? From the Illuminati, Freemasons, Rosicrucian, Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, and the 1,000 other organizations, Zionists, Jesuits. What secrets do they have? What secrets do the powers that control our government? What do they know? And who are they in cahoots with? Like some of the presidents of the past, 67 years ago, apparently met with some aliens and made some deals. Is this true? Was there a small battle? Were these descriptions of rocks falling from heaven and fiery tornadoes, were these weapons that people were describing? As best they could describe, considering what they knew back then. Okay, moving on. That storm across Georgia, from the phrase, a black tornado, filled with fire, does not have to be considered extra normal just from the description. Tornadoes are black. They often involve brilliant and vicious displays of electrics on outer edges, not in the middle, fill. So if it was filled in the middle with fire, that's kind of strange. moving on here on this book, just pointing out there's some strange things that have happened in the past, and it might behoove us to kind of pay attention to what's going on now and who might be involved. There were extensive gravitational irregularities, and if something was made to surge through the lower atmosphere, thereby creating a vehement black cloud filled with fire. Could we have had the close approach of a vast scattering of space debris, through which the Earth passed during a period of several days, and from which we have meteorites, water, dust, cold, etc., and the disruption of the normal meteorological processes over most of our globe, not to speak of seismic upheavals on a wide scale? This is Morris Jessup, the author of this book, theorizing when he wrote his book, The Case for UFOs. And the aliens highlighted some of his sentences, if they are aliens. People that seem to know more than what we know were correcting Dr. Morris Jessup's book. So Morris Jessup says, time after time it seems that isolated clouds of a singular appearance approach the Earth's surface, yet remain suspended in flight. There's been a thought of mine a couple times on the sky spraying of that white chemicals, possibly also biologicals, into the sky that anybody could look up and see that they're doing. Could they be trying to do something so they're able to detect any kind of alien craft? Is there some kind of cosmic battle going on? When Jesus was on the cross, and one of the soldiers stuck him with a knife and taunted him and said, "Where is your God now?" Something like that, I'm paraphrasing. And Jesus said, "Do you not think that if I wanted to, that if I called on God, that would not God send 12 leagues of angels to save me?" So this seems to be more to reality here than we know. If Jesus could have just called up and God would have sent forth 12 leagues of angels to attack all those people. But Jesus said, "I came here to die on the cross." It was prophesied, so that's what I must do. I'm paraphrasing. But I'm just saying, you put all this into context. Who are these leagues of angels? This is the first time in the Bible, in the New Testament, that these beings appeared, apparently called angels. Just saying, how does all this fit together? All right, we've got another quotation here from John Besser of Faith, March 1954. The Battle of the Clouds. Here we go again. On July 28th, 1874. So this was told by John Besser in 54. But the Battle of the Clouds reported on July 28th, 1874. A little community of Sawmill Rum near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, met with disaster from a most singular phenomenon. Curious villagers and country folk looked at the sky and beheld something very strange. On the northeastern horizon, slowly and majestically, sailed a black cloud, ringed with a scarlet belt, a red belt. Over the southwest horizon slowly sailed another black cloud with a scarlet belt, a red belt around it. Onward they came towards each other. So these two clouds are coming towards each other with red belts, stripes around them. Like two men of war approaching the scene of battle. As they drew nearer, they discharged flashes of lightning, and the whole effect was that of an eerie sea battle high in the air. Wow. Sounds like a sci-fi movie. Nearer and nearer they drew, the violence of the flashes of lightning increasing the closer they approached, until with one great flash they collided, and rain fell in torrents. 150 persons drowned, and it is believed to be the most disastrous flood ever to befall that section of the country. And before I tell you what the alien says, I did go over in a previous video. Let me get the book. I read this book earlier. See my tabs. And I believe I made a video on it. Apparently, according to some ancient history, a tribe in Africa describes some beings who came to Earth who were aquatic. So the planet they came from, Sirius B, in the Sirius star system, is a watery planet. And when they came here in their ships, instead of ships that we have full of oxygen so we can breathe, they came in ships full of water so they could breathe. So apparently when these ships battle, and I guess blow up another ship, you're blowing up a ship full of water. Just saying. It's more supporting information when you've read as many books as I have. With that in mind, let's listen to what the aliens say in this book. That's why I like reading such a diversified collection of books. You can put different pieces of the puzzle together. The alien says, the LMs live in water half or more of the time, and it is no wonder so much water fell from two motherships, Lemurian or Meanian ships, in battle, no doubt. So apparently these entities with these big ships in our atmosphere are either Lemurian, apparently an island that had sunk many years ago in Earth's history, Lemuria, like Atlantis, and Muania ships in battle. So the LMs would be the Muanians, and the LMs would be the Lemurians, and the I forget what the LMs are, would be the, Lemurians or Meanian, I don't know. But apparently describing two different groups of people in battle. You can read it yourself. So that's what the alien says. Crazy? You think? Rubbish in space. So anyways, I highlighted this here, that these meteorites had been identified by their texture and chemical elements, as well as their external appearance, was not enough to overcome bigotry, and more than one French scientist had to risk his profession, standing before the Academy in Paris, ere it was accepted by science that iron and stone did not fall from the sky. The controversy was raging as recently as 150 years ago. So here you were, a scientist, and you reported on an incident of a big explosion in the sky, and iron and rocks were falling from the sky, and you had to go talk before the your professional association. You'd lose your job, your reputation. So firm was astronomy in its entrenched dogma that there are still some respected men who dispute that the Arizona meteor crater is meteoritic in origin. The alien says it was the Great Bombardment. The Great Bombardment announced the end of Mu. So I guess they bombarded Mu and totally destroyed it. So the alien says in this book, if they are aliens, It is not surprising, therefore, when we learn that among the vast amount of material that has fallen from the sky, sulfur is present. But it cannot fall from the sky because it isn't in the sky. But it does. So can we believe historic accounts in these books like this one, Ivan Sanderson? Hang on a second. Just thought I'd take a moment, go grab some books. Books I've yet to read that I have in my collection. The Greatest Deception, The Bible UFO Connection. It says on the back here, the church ignores it. Hundreds of verses record flying vehicles and advanced technology in the Bible, but the church is silent. Again, I'm a Christian. I believe whoever sent Jesus, and what he preached I believe in. Treat others how you want to be treated. Can anybody argue with that? I believe in the Ten Commandments. Whatever spoke to Moses, call it God, whatever, and said don't kill each other and don't steal from each other. I agree with that. Does anybody want to argue with that? So when I pick my religion, I grew up Christian. You're probably not going to sway me. Just as if you grew up Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist or Hindu, you're probably not going to sway people. American Indians, Mayans, these people grew up in a culture. But yet again, we should open up our eyes and try to say, okay, what is behind the scene? Why did they send somebody to die on the cross? To make a point, and we are spiritual beings. We cannot deny that. There's more to this reality than our physical, biological bodies. So it's much more complex than we know. And whoever sent these prophets, or Jesus, or whatever, Moses, to preach these things, don't kill each other, don't steal from each other, don't lie about each other, don't covet and envy what somebody else has, don't commit adultery, don't worship idols, little statues, don't sacrifice people. These are not difficult things to accept in any religion. So any more books I have, Aliens Among Us. Just some books. Beyond the Poles. Apparently, there's some theories, evidence, books published, people's accounts, that if you go to the North Pole, to the South Pole, you're going to find a grand entrance into the earth. Got a lot of research to go. I've already come a long ways. The gods have landed. New religions from other worlds. The Chronicle of Ankakor, where Karl Brugger went down there to Venezuela in the Amazon jungle and found entrances to underground cities and civilizations. Kind of interesting hieroglyphic writings. Here's Karl Brugger here. I read this book. You can see all my tabs. I think I made a video on it. The Bringers of the Dawn, Palladians coming to save us, saying that they are sorry for the mistakes they made thousands of years ago when they interfered with the human race and messed with our history and our DNA and some other things. What to believe? Gods from Outer Space. I really like Erich von Däniken. I did one video on one of his books. I want to probably read this one. But he goes into some of the stuff I go over here with the hieroglyphics from Egypt. Down there in the Yucatan, the Mayan pyramids. statues from history. American Indians. Monuments like this. But my concern is, for we people today, 2016, this new age and this new world order and all these secret societies, these manipulators of mankind, mind control, taking over the educational system, the economic system, the medical system. They own the media, the press. They're lying to us every day, even mesmerizing and putting people in trances with the media, the TV programming and news and movies and programming and shows. They're playing with our minds, and I want to know who they are. And the end game doesn't look too good. The New World Order, the New Age, biodiversity. I just want to connect the past with the present and try to find out who and what these entities are. And it looks like they want to reduce the Earth's population by 90%. And I'm not convinced there are 6 or 7 billion people. I think it's just with the technologies they have now, and now that the Zionist Jewish folks have Israel, and they're trying to take over all the land from the Euphrates in Iraq down to the Nile in Egypt. There's maps, you can go look up Zionism. The greater Israel, look it up. They're going to have a country half the size of the United States when it's over. And they have nuclear weapons, and if you've been watching my videos, like Zionism, Bloody Zion, the Jewish Utopia, Jack Bernstein, an American Jew Goes to Israel, and so many more I've done, and Noetic Laws, and the Talmud, whatever these entities are, they think that we people are animals, cattle, to be slain and done away with at their will. We have no souls. We're just like unwanted pests. So then I'm reading this stuff about these aliens or creatures having a battle in space, and this stuff in Morris Jessup's book called The Great Bombardment. The Great Bombardment announced the end of Mu. Do they want to announce the end of humanity? Are there some aliens who have plans for the future for themselves? Even Hitler was into the supreme race. They're into genetics. They're into cloning. They're into Monsanto genetically modified foods. They're doing many strange things. They're sky spraying us, HARP system, microwave transmitters located all over the world. And then I'm reading this stuff. So let me finish up on this book. I can ramble on. It is not surprising, therefore, when we learn that among the vast amount of material that has fallen from the sky, sulfur is present. But it cannot fall from the sky because it isn't in the sky. But it does. In 1868, a mass of burning sulfur, about the size of a man's fist, fell at Poltusk, Poland, on January 30th. It fell upon a road and was stomped out by several villagers. Inflammable objects falling from the sky may well account for the many reports of falling fire, from which no tangible debris is found, and since such material is of low specific gravity, its velocity is speedily checked by atmospheric friction, and it can fall slowly, burning the wild, and thus perhaps give rise to some of the reports of large appearing, slowly moving masses of fire. So then it says SM ships or arcs. So the alien says it's ships or arcs in our atmosphere, flying above the Earth back then. The jagged pieces of ice which fell at Orkney, July 24th, 1818, had strong sulfurous odor, and also had the coke, or what looked like coke, which fell at Montreuil, France, April 24th, 1887, of which fell a sulfurous substance. So during the 1800s, sulfurous substances were falling from something, and the enormous round things which rose from the ocean. Ivan Sanderson, in his books Invisible Resident, he wrote a couple books, talks about ships like the Mayflower sailing up the coast of England and Africa, seeing gigantic ships come rising up out of the ocean. Reported to Lloyd's of London's insurance company when they returned to their home port. Near Victoria, whether we accept they were super constructions or something else, excluding perhaps imagination, it was reported that they spread a stench of sulfur if they smelled like that. They could not have been too distant, could they? The alien says LM ships on undersea exploration stayed too long, gathered a coat on shield edge. So apparently these ships had some kind of electromagnetic shield. Burned it off at surface. So they were under the ocean and got some debris coating on their ship. And when they rose up out of the ocean, they burned off on the surface. Ice gathered of Venusian voyage and burned off when coming out of shield. Same for other materials, but these caught on other planets. So are there aliens, and do they come and go from planet Earth? Who are these ones who made comments to Jessup Morris's book here? Moving on to Jessup Morris's material. There was a staggering fall of dust and mud in Europe in February 1903. It seems that southern England was quite a dumping ground, although some scientists thought the dust came from lanes or byways of the local shrines. They hadn't heard that it also covered the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa. The substance contained a sizable percentage of organic matter and was, of course, identified by some as sand from the Sahara Desert. It covered Ireland, England, and the Canaries. It was reported on the 27th in Belgium, Holland, Germany, and Austria. 10 million tons fell on South England alone. A vessel reported the stuff falling midway between England and Barbados, and it fell on Switzerland, according to Simon's Meteorological Magazine, 1903. It fell in Russia. Not only did Australia get covered with the stuff, in November 1902, it was falling there again in February. Enormously, 50 tons per square mile of red mud. The alien says, results of LM's home on the moon being built. So they're building a home on the moon, and all this mud is falling on Earth. Are they taking these ships, conveying stuff to the moon, and stuff from the moon, conveying it back here, or just interesting thinking and reading here, stuff that was reported that happened. If I were to give my opinion, I would say that these instances were reported as the people believed that they happened. So those are the facts from many different sources in this book. It is therefore my contention that these falls of mud originated in space. That's Morris Jessup saying that. The alien says, and you can see the alien has his own little way of showing you what he says here. Not atomic, was sudden, broad inert snap of stasis. So, was it that when they go through a portal or open up an interdimensional portal and they go from dematerializing to materializing, does it cause some kind of snap in our atmosphere which causes a loud boom and probably other things? Remember, they got CERN over there in Geneva, which is on the border of Switzerland and France. And remember, they have the Goddess of Destruction statue out front. The logo is 666. Geneva is the long-term homeland of the Illuminati and the original location of the story of Frankenstein. What's all this have to do with each other? Something, I suppose. All right, let's listen to what the aliens highlighted that Jessup wrote. It is equally our contention that if all of this dispersed but tangible array of assorted items can exist in nearby space or in orbits intersecting that of the Earth, and if all of these things can have escaped the causingness of science, of science for a long time. So why aren't the scientists dealing with this? And what do the governments know that they're not sharing with us? What are these Illuminati, Mystery School of Babylon, Freemasons, Rosicrucian, all these mystery cults, witchcraft, sacrificing people, controlling governments, Zionism, Jesuits? What do they know that we don't know? What master are they serving? Is that a fair question? Then there is no reason why intelligently operated contrivances cannot also be the same as celestial regions, have escaped our attention in spite of visiting our atmosphere frequently. The alien says, visiting, explanation point, they live here and work here, build here, but fortunately all undersea. So the alien says they've been here all along, and they live under the ocean. Don't forget, supposedly, there's an inner Earth. Quite a bit of substantiating data to support that. Now, if we are on a gigantic flat plane with some kind of shield over Earth to keep out the frozen air of space and to keep in our oxygen, and on this gigantic flat plane, apparently there could be other shields and other communities. They could be scientific in nature. They could have large ships. I mean, if we are this gigantic manufactured, what we call Earth, flat Earth, with a shield, somebody manufactured it, and apparently of such scientific nature that they created this DNA, which is a code, obviously intelligently designed by God. Now you got to ask, who is God? What is God? So that the spiritual entities could enter these biological bodies as children, and probably animals and all that other stuff that they've been designed, like group consciousness of monkeys and birds. If you don't know about the 100th monkey syndrome, look it up. But apparently they're all connected to a group consciousness. Each breed genetic creation is connected to a group consciousness. So whoever designed this Earth, maybe flat, maybe a globe hurtling through space, has a shield around it and a reality that we're all experiencing. But if it is a gigantic flat plane, or even a globe, would they say there's a hollow Earth, but a flat plane with tunnels underneath to other flat plane cities, whatever you want to call us, with a dome over them. And in my dream, there were 54 of these on this Earth plane that we're on. Whatever that means. I'm just theorizing. So an enormous amount of videos on YouTube about the flat Earth. So many people are buying into that. I've got some questions. Why, when you take the circumference of Earth going around the sun, and you can calculate that out pretty easy. Look it up. The diameter times pi equals the circumference of a circle. Fun math. And so you get the circumference. 700 million miles or something. and divide that by 365 days in a year by 24 hours, you get 66 and 600 miles per hour. Which odd, 666. If you take, the Earth is supposed to be tilted, not straight parallel to the sun, but tilted, which apparently is why we have our seasons, because one way the north is tilted away, and when it's on this side, the north is towards the sun. But if you take that tilt minus 90 degrees, you get 66.6 degrees. Now I know the devil likes to, Satanism and the Illuminati, they like to do things right in front of our faces, deceive us, laugh at us. So could they have put the 666 code into a big lie about a hurtling ball through space at a particular angle, and the circumference divided by the 365 days by 24 hours? 666. And both 666. Just makes one wonder. What is reality? What is this stuff here in this book? Apparently these things that Morris Jessup researched, professor in astronomy, apparently from magazines, newspapers, journals, people, everything in here can probably be researched and looked up. Know others of other stuff, we all do. So all these things probably did happen. And again, what does it have to do with today? Who's behind the scenes trying to destroy the world as we know it, and freedom, and take away property rights like in the United States? It's a grand theft as far as I'm concerned. Somebody wants all the minerals, resources, and wealth, and wants to enslave the people, and wants to kill off those they don't need. Who are these monsters amidst us? So I'll finish this book up here, this particular chapter. And I'll tell you what the next chapter is when I finish this, and maybe I'll make a part 4 of this book. I did skip over a lot of stuff, but I thought I would get into the stuff of things falling from the sky, things happening in the sky, recorded, documented. Moving on here. 1880, 1881, 1882. In its simplest form, then, our idea is that the least objectionable explanation for these falls is that they may come from intelligently originated spacecraft, or in some way formed, guided, and influenced by the operators of such craft. So I think I can buy this. I can believe that these people who are reporting seeing things in the sky are real. We all know there are gigantic monuments all over the planet that can't be explained and can't be built today. True? It's not outside. That doesn't mean there's no God. That doesn't mean we're not biological beings with spiritual souls and all that stuff doesn't exist. It does mean that whoever created this earth and this shield that engulfs us, whether it's spiritual, a globe in nature, spherical, or flat with a dome, to me it's a moot argument when you consider other issues. But anyways, whoever created it, with all the designs of trees, plants, birds, bees, etc., with the DNA code intelligently created, did it for a reason. And I, for one, as a spiritual being, knowing that I can't live in this biological body forever, and I will die in this biological body, and my spirit will leave and go where it's supposed to go. So somebody created all this for my benefit of my spiritual soul to experience this reality, and everybody else's. And apparently we're all given a choice on how to behave. One wonders where we wind up after this life for those who are cruel and evil versus those who are decent and good people. When you look at Aleister Crowley, do as thou wilt, and the Theosophical Society, and all that stuff, preaching the Lucifer agenda, religion, who kill and murder and to get all their gain and their wealth and their riches, enslaving people, pedophilia, molesting, raping women, men, wars, murder. What a drama this reality on earth is. I call it the grand school. We all were sent here. We get to show who we really are. We have freedom of choice. Moving on here, trying to finish up this chapter. Also, there appears to be ample observational proof for this view since 1947. So the common denominator does appear to exist in the contemplation of space flight or space navigation, or to put it more simply, in space life. There appears to be the least improbable causal factor in sight at this time. Jessup says, I believe that space between the Earth and Moon is occupied, however thinly, by large navigable constructions of a rigid nature. So Jessup believes that above this Earth there are navigable constructions, gigantic ships, whose size may range from 1 to many miles in diameter, which have a planetary appearances as seen in telescopes. These sometimes come closer to the Earth. So is everything so far as they would have us believe, or are there things above us that are much closer? There are other bodies which seem to be of cloud-like nature, which cast shadows on both the Earth and the Moon, and which may range the entire solar system, accompanying comets. These also, or their smaller components, sometimes approach the Earth. All of these objects invite evidences of control by intelligences, as do the more recently cited UFOs. And all you got to do is go on any one of the current 2016 UFO reporting sites like MUFON, etc., and you'll see that there are gigantic motherships reported, triangular in shape, saucer in shape, glowing orbs reported. Something more to our reality than most of us know. Smaller scouts or operators, which are probably inhabitants of or associates of the great spherical contraptions, are constantly seen in Earth's atmosphere. There are many types, and in fact it does seem that many of them have the ability to change shapes. Here we go again. They seem to be of two sorts, the solid and material, or the massless and ethereal. There was one guest on Coast to Coast with George Norrie the other night. And this one lady was talking about her boyfriend, who came across a ship, maybe 12 feet in diameter, spaceship. And the entity invited her boyfriend, this was before she met him, in the ship. And what was amazing in the story, when he entered the ship, the inside was as if it was an entire city. It's more to perception and reality than we all know. What is really going on? I was up early, late one night, couldn't sleep, turned on Coast to Coast like I do sometimes, and that's what she said. So, they seem to be of two sorts, the solid or the material, the massless or the ethereal. All exhibit elements of control, but the weightless ones seem more to have the appearance of remote control. Solid types tend to be discoid or spherical or spindle-shaped, and these shapes in themselves are indicative of intelligence construction. The alien says, read Your Sins and Mine. I think that maybe that's a book. I'll have to look it up. For clues. Your Sins and Mine. For clues. Ethereal types don't change shape, only change in sensitivity, or amount of protective force shield to ward off extra fast, tiny meteors or to change course. The alien also says, also wards off cosmic rays particles. As to what is to come if LMs get disgusted with man's misanthropic non-philosophism and materialism. So, if these aliens get disgusted with us, according to this writer, what's going to happen? Man has many books on the true thought, yet they ignore them. Bible, Quran, etc. Angels, LMs fiercely. So here he is tying in angels and the Bible and these entities that exist and are paying attention to our activities on earth. And he's saying the alien who's commenting on Jessup's material here, what if they get disgusted? Ethereal types, similar to result of Navy experiments in force field invisibility. 1943, solids go through them. No harm to occupants at all. So back to the Philadelphia experiment in this book. So to sum it up on this particular chapter, what I went over, there appears to be plenty of evidence that there are ships cruising in our skies and above our skies, coming in and out of our atmospheres, coming up out of the oceans. And apparently there are two different organizations or more battling each other. And when they do attack each other's ships or send off missiles or whatever they have for weaponry, strange things happen on Earth. Again, what's that got to do with the situation of today? With the mystery school of Babylon. Babylon means the gateway to the gods. The murder and mayhem going in the entire Middle East, murdering all of the inhabitants, Muslims and others alike, and those that are alive are fleeing to Europe and America. And apparently Israel has plans for a greater Israel from the Euphrates River in Iraq. This is all biblical. To the Nile in Egypt. So it's all intentional. There is a plan. They do want this new world order, this new age. They are trying to destroy Christianity and change our social structure from a godless people promoting the homosexual, transgenderism, and other animalistic society. Now, where we humans don't even have control over our children or our own minds with all the programming and mind control going on. The grand deception. Interesting. I'll have to read this book. The Greatest Deception. The Bible UFO Connection. I bought this a long time ago. I got so many books I can't get to read them all. But slowly I do. Anyways, the next chapter in this book, part 3. Disappearing ships and crews. History speaks. And when I got this book years ago, I did read it all. But now that I'm rereading it, because I didn't highlight it back then, I didn't know I was going to make videos back then. So I'm haven't read the portions coming up next. And that's what I do every day between my job, is I continue to read this stuff. And in this case, highlight it like I've done here. So then I can sit down and make a video reading my highlighted portions and adding my commentary. So what is the truth? We know that, like recently, Obama did issue executive orders trying to increase gun controls. We know that a lot of strange things are going on across the planet. Even Argentina and other countries are suffering dire straits economically. Somebody's causing everything to come to a point ahead, you know, a revolution, chaos, and anarchy. They want to bring about a one world order, a one world religion, and freedom is the past. If they get their way. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. I read books. I watch videos, magazines, and alternate websites, newspaper articles. And we can say there is some grand plan in play. And it might behoove we the people to stop trying to be compliant zombies. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Marrico reporting.